Okay, hello everyone. I'm Alex Mackenzie, and I'm here to talk about eBPF, the capital markets perspective, and specifically the venture capital markets perspective. Now, maybe as some of you know, I've been in the weeds of eBPF for some time now, but don't expect to be as in the weeds as the majority of this audience. What I perhaps do expect to know something about, though, is the world of venture capital, and more specifically, how the business model of venture capital impacts our thinking when it comes to investing in new technologies like eBPF. The second point that I'm going to talk about is really the idea that I subscribe to, the idea that venture capital is a business of aggregation. If we do our job right, if we listen well enough, we should speak to the smartest people on specific domains, aggregate those learnings, kind of build a worldview, and then invest in that worldview as a result. So what I'll do is share some of the learnings that I've gathered along the way. So yeah, a little bit more about me. I'm a partner at Tapestry. We're a venture fund that invests in technical repeat founders across Europe and the US. So think of companies like Hopin, Pitch, Crossbeam, Standard Cognition. But then beyond the world of investing, I still spend a lot of my time writing code, or at least hacking code together. If you want to see that, you can check out my GitHub, lambast accordingly, that's fine. But what I also do is write a number of technical primers on technologies that I'm excited about and that I think others should be excited about too. So I've written about eBPF, which is kind of why I'm here, but also on federated learning, a number of JavaScript runtimes, and then other posts like how to build developer tools that developers love. So yeah, agenda. First, we're going to talk about, again, the business model of venture capital. We're going to back that up with a bit of data. We're going to talk about the world or industry of infra, how the public markets view infra, how the private markets view infra. And then we're going to jump into the meat of the presentation, which, is eBPF. We're going to talk about market views. I'm going to share the investment frameworks that we use, or at least some of them that we use when thinking about investing in a new technology or ecosystem. I'm going to talk about the whatNow in eBPF. What do I think is exciting to invest in next, or at least watch? And then the why now. Why is now the time to keep an eye on eBPF? So firstly, as maybe some of you know, venture capital is a business of power laws. Really what that means, if you think about it as an individual fund level, is that really 1 to 2 to 3 of your investments are expected to drive the majority of the returns of your fund. You can zoom out and you can then actually look at that across the general venture market. So you can stack a number of firms next to one another. And again, what you'll see is an exponential curve here, where a small minority of the funds return the majority of the capital. Horsey Bridge has provided some data here, which kind of really shows that off. So as you'll see, across 1985 to 2014, 6% of the investments made returned 60% of the capital, right? Venture capital is a business of outliers. But again, what you'll see is the best performing funds, it's not as if they had fewer failures. Failure was actually more common. But what they did is they just had much greater successes, right? So this is the interesting thing about venture, because other asset classes are far more about managing your risk, mitigating risk. The idea of losing money at all is not good, right? So again, venture capital is just an interesting asset class. We aim for outliers. If we think about this 6%, I mean, of late, really it has been tied to this category of infra. And again, I've seen a lot of definitions for infra. My favorite is from a friend of mine, Sam Crowder, where he says, infra is anything that helps in the development, delivery, and security of software. Right? So think of HashiCorp, SentinelOne, Snowflake, Cloudflare, etc. And why these companies are so attractive is that they're really top tier performers in a number of the metrics that we would use as investors to evaluate how successful SaaS companies are performing. So if we think of something like net dollar retention, which again is the amount of, or the increase or decrease in revenue from one cohort across one time to another, we'll see that we're seeing incredible rates here, right? 173% in the case of Snowflake. If we, just to kind of make that more concrete, think about Snowflake, for example, and think about that from one cohort, they're making a total of $1 in revenue. They've got 173% net dollar retention. So what that means is that that $1 will turn into $1.73. And how that happens is that over a period of time, that customer base will expand, right? They'll opt into more expensive plans. Some of them will churn, they'll stop being customers. Some of them will downgrade. But in net, you'll see that again, Snowflake is turning that $1 into $1.73, and that's a pretty attractive position to be in. We could speculate all day about why these companies could do this, but I think the most obvious reason is that it's incredibly painful to rip out your infrastructure. Everything about your application and business runs on this infrastructure, is intertwined within this infrastructure. So again, pretty difficult to rip that out, and I empathize with any of you that have had to deal with that. I just thought this was interesting. Again, you see a power law among power laws here, right? Cloudflare, Datadog, Sentinel-1, GitLab, etc. We're all outlier successes, and yet Snowflake is an outlier among these outliers. And you'll see that the private market really is no different, right? Again, these infrastructure businesses are built on the same fundamental properties that make them such great businesses. So it congrats to Wiz that went from 1 to 100 million ARR in just over a year, right? Surpassing companies like Deal and Ramp, UiPath, Slack, and another infrastructure peer, Twilio. Okay, so where does eBPF come into this whole narrative? Well, the best description that I heard from my conversations came from an engineer from one of the main observability players, and they said that the correct way of doing things, eBPF is the correct way of doing things. It's correct and precise innovation. And kind of what he means here is that eBPF is Infra++, right? It is the best way to do Infra. We can do APM, we can do runtime observability, we can do API observability. eBPF, again, there's technical trade-offs, of course, but in a number of ways or times, eBPF is the best way to do it. That could be because, again, your code as an eBPF program can be pretty performant when it's running in kernel space versus user space. That can be because your eBPF program has grander access to a bunch of low-level resources versus, again, the user space application. There's a number of reasons. And again, I've heard a number of them articulated. If we focus firstly on the ground cover, the founder said something super interesting to me, which is that if you think about general observability solutions, many of them run in user space, right? So we're relying on a user space application to watch other applications in user space, which kind of begs the question of who is watching the watcher in this case, right? And their whole take is that they can actually use eBPF to watch user space. And all of a sudden you kind of solve for that watching of the watcher problem. Again, I think Secret was doing something super interesting as well, where they were thinking about layer 7 traffic monitoring and not really being able to use something like TCP dump for that. But again, eBPF enabled them to do that. Right? They were able to do better traffic monitoring and hence better API observability as a result of eBPF. It's the correct way of doing things. It's correct and precise innovation. So yeah, these are just a number of frameworks that we use when we're thinking about new technologies. And I had to get a dig in at the JavaScript frameworks when I had the platform. But yeah, first one we use is, is this technology incremental or is it really building something new as a category defining? And kind of what we ask ourselves is, what can or should now be done at scale because of a new technology? So if you think about something like containers, yes, they were incredible, right? But what happened as a result is that you had a number of vulnerable images that, again, then a solution was required as a result of this new technology or new paradigm. A new solution was required to actually monitor these images, scan them, and make sure that those images that you were using were safe and reliable. So again, new technology resulted in a new company being built in a large space. That's attractive. What's not attractive is companies that effectively are features. They're not categories. Another framework that we use is the idea of counter positioning, and I'm told this is something that is taught in many MBAs that I unfortunately missed, but really what it means is that on a fundamental level, why is an incumbent typically not able to adopt the same business model or approach that you can adopt, because inherently they've made a series of strategic decisions that have stacked upon each other that just fundamentally stops them from being able to do what you do. The kind of canonical example here is Netflix and Blockbuster. Right? Blockbuster built this whole retail set of chains and stores. It was a large retail business. It wasn't within them to then actually start sending media, sending DVDs, sending videos, whereas Netflix was able to do that straight off the bat. They didn't have to manage all this CapEx. And again, that enabled them to move a whole lot faster before Blockbuster could catch up. And we kind of know how that one played out. We also like to ask a question specifically for Infra, which is just, where does big cloud suck? I think PaaS is a good example here. And you can find where big cloud sucks. There's probably a big business to be built around it. Another idea that we use is increasing returns, right? Will every unit of positive scale result in a greater marginal return? So another way of saying that is, or another example of that is something like network effects, right? Each new user within the network makes the network more valuable, which hence results in more people joining the network. Each unit here has made the ultimate marginal return larger. And then one that we use a lot and that I quite like is the idea of an upstream, right? So you could be a new technology that's used further up the stack than a bunch of other large players. And then as a result, can you kind of claim ownership on those other areas of the stack or chain in time? And I do think to kind of level the playing field with JavaScript frameworks, Vercel has done this, right? If you look at Next.js, write your code, use Next.js, and then of course, deploy with Vercel. It just makes sense, if not for conveniency, for a bunch of other reasons. So then what now with eBPF? I had the pleasure of meeting with one of the, ostensibly, one of the greats of venture. I asked this person, how do you think about being a fantastic venture capitalist? And this person said, all you got to do is do the best deals. And I kind of think this same way, that if you were to ask somebody that knew nothing about the world of venture capital, what makes you a good venture capitalist, they would probably say, I don't know, probably invest in the best companies, do great deals, right? And then you get all this middle in between of all this complexity. So then I apply this framework also to the world of security, right? And this is where eBPF ties in, which is like, if you ask somebody what is the idea of security broadly, it's to stop bad things from happening, i.e. runtime enforcement. But we do a whole bunch in the middle of observability, triaging, escalation, training models to infer tickets that we should flag, etc. When really what we're trying to do is just stop bad things from happening. We're trying to do runtime enforcement. So I'm super excited about what the folk at Island are doing and what they have open source when it comes to runtime enforcement. Otherwise, I'm excited more broadly just about thinking about eBPF programs as modules, right? Deploying pieces of code as eBPF programs and benefiting from the performance results that come from that. And then if we get a bit more blue sky, I think it was Ferris Ellis that thought about or written about the eBPF virtual machine being ported beyond the Linux kernel and into environments like SmartNICs, right? And thinking about all that will unlock. My general thought on this is that eBPF came from being a result of the constraints of the Linux kernel, right? This incredible technology and platform came from constraints. So I'm pretty excited about the other constraints that will come from eBPF being deployed to SmartNICs, right? So yeah, excited about that. And then the why now for eBPF. So firstly, we've begun to see some exits in the space, right? We've seen New Relic acquiring Pixie. We've seen very recently Datadog acquiring Secret. It's kind of showing the general market that there is a lot of appetite, one, for just acquisitions, which means ultimately capital to investors at some point in time. But two, it kind of shows that the incumbents perhaps aren't in the position to really build these technologies in-house the way they may be in a relative sense to other technologies, right? It's more valuable or far easier to acquire companies to gain that competency. I think that means that there's an interesting opportunity to actually challenge incumbents, right? That's enticing as an investor. I think broadly speaking, the industry has a far better understanding of eBPF, and ultimately, if you have more educated buyers, you have more buyers, right? So that becomes more attractive for us as investors. And just as a small anecdote, I saw a comment or heard a comment from a friend that said KubeCon was basically eBPF and wasn't gone, right? eBPF is occupying more of the mainstream infra mindset, and I think that's pretty exciting. And then technical maturity, right? It's become the point where eBPF has become far more general purpose. Again, this could be because we've got eBPF for Windows now, but more broadly, we say at Tapestry that we like general purpose software, right? Because if your software technology can be used across a broader range of use cases, your market size increases, right? So yeah, I think that's enticing. And then again, a series of eBPF tool chains have also emerged, right? It is easier to build eBPF programs, it's easier to connect them, to manage them, etc. So yeah, that's it from me. Just to reiterate, I invest with Tapestry. We back technical repeat founders across Europe and US. And I mean, if any of what I spoke about today resonates with you, or if you're thinking about building a company, I'd love to talk to any one of you. My email is my name @tapestry.vc. And yeah, looking forward to chatting with some of you.